Well, Misty,
Well, Amaryllis,
you've made me watch another movie,
and I've proved my point once again
and that is,
that children get kidnapped.
well, that's true.
So, but I bet I don't seem so crazy now, do I?
Well, honestly, I was like, crap, why does this have to happen? And Misty was going to come to my house, and she's going to gloat about being right.
Yeah.
Listen, I watched this movie. Hey, listener, I watched this movie, and it was just, if you've seen it, you know. If you know, you know. You just can't even.
You really can't.
Yeah. And I called Misty, and I was like, we can't do this. This is not funny.
It's not funny at all.
Funny at all.
No.
And she said, this is a laugh a minute. We have to do it.
I absolutely did not say that. I actually said, if they have to hear about it, at least they can hear about it from our voices, which are intoxicating. That's what I said.
Listen, if we can make Abducted in Plain Sight
enjoyable.
I don't know about enjoyable, but palatable maybe.
It's almost like when you are firing someone, you try to get the person that they hate the least to tell them.
Right.
So that way they don't
We're in that situation
go
right now.
crazy. That's kind of the situation we're in.
Okay.
We got to give y'all some bad news, okay? And it's this documentary. It's real bad.
It's so bad.
And look, I feel so weird saying this that I love murder. That's not true.
I can't wait. I love it.
I don't love murder, but I am intrigued by criminal kind of like crime documentaries, okay? Number one, because I think I'm educating myself in a way that I can protect myself from these events happening to me, okay? Which is crazy, but that's the way my brain works. And then also because I'm a looky-loo. Like, if there's something going on, I want to see what's going on. And I know I'm going to be scared, and I know I'm going to have a nightmare, and I know Philip's going to have to like stand outside the bathroom door while I check the shower curtain and all that before I pee. But
Right.
I still want to see it. You know what I'm saying?
Someone might have come in while you were watching this movie.
Right. Like when we watch scary movies, I say, hey, I really want to watch this scary movie. And he says, why do you want to do that to yourself? And I say, I don't know. And then we watch the scary movie, and I'm real scared, and I'll say, now let's watch something happy. And so we have to watch like an episode of The Office.
It cancels
to
it
help
out.
me. Yeah.
So then do you dream that Michael Scott's coming to kill you?
No, I just,
You never conflate them.
no, I could never believe Michael Scott would hurt me.
Well, that's true.
Ever. Ever. Because I love him so much. But I do check behind my own shower curtains for the next month.
Well, I mean, it's prudent.
Yeah.
It's prudent.
Yeah.
I'm Amaryllis.
And I'm Misty.
We watch documentaries, and in this case, so you really don't have to.
You really may not want to watch
You really may
this.
not want to.
I mean,
what are we talking about, Misty?
Today we are talking about The Girl in the Picture.
On Netflix. It's
On
Netflix's
Netflix.
latest and greatest.
Yes.
Hey, do we want to say anything before we get started?
Well, I think we got some Patreons to call out, don't we?
We do.
And in case you didn't know, we have a thriving Patreon channel.
Really?
We really do.
Thriving.
Well,
Okay, wait.
well, maybe if you do make fun of us, we'll get more patrons. Hey, guys, we were real hot for a while. Can y'all kick it back up? I know we had to take a break, but everybody
Wait, we got to
deserves a
start
break.
over. Wait. We got, because
No,
that's going in. Okay.
You're keeping that in. No, yes, you are. They need to know the truth.
What's the truth?
We need some more patrons. Tell your friends.
What about the 10s and 10s that are in there?
Well, listen,
We're so grateful for them. Oh, my gosh.
we love them so much, but gas prices is high.
Misty lives 5 minutes away. It takes a lot to get here.
It does take a lot to
You
get
could
here.
totally, you could come on bicycle.
Oh, no, I'd rather just run here. But then I'm scared.
Do you run at night?
Absolutely not.
All right. That was a stupid question.
No, but I did start running again, and my sweet friend Lynn, JD's mom, we went out to eat for my birthday, which was in May. But we just got around to it. And she bought me this cute little running backpack. She runs too, and I've just started running again. And she got me the cutest little bottle of mace.
Oh, that's a good gift for you.
It is. It's pink. And so if somebody tries to attack me, I can spray them in the eyes with it.
Or a raccoon.
Or a dog.
Uh-huh.
Or an untamed child. Just whatever.
Whatever
I come across.
That's a great gift.
Yeah, I loved it.
We should create some merch.
Yeah.
And find a pepper spray distributor. I did tell Misty I was going to start selling water bottles that said toilet wine.
Yes, you should. I said we should do a wine tumbler.
That says toilet wine.
That says toilet wine.
We're Christians. We can't.
Could y'all please email us and tell us if you'd buy it?
This is how we entertain ourselves in the middle of the night. Because
Yes.
we don't go to bed till late.
That's right. Yeah, we stay up all night.
Okay. All right. Let's shout out some of these patrons.
Okay.
Laura. Oh wait, I can't say that.
Need one of those. Like,
Laura, I said your last name. Rest assured, I have gone back and bleeped it out. I'm so sorry.
it's fine. It's fine.
Laura, thank you for joining our little
Laura.
community. Adriana.
Ariana.
I don't know how to say your name, but all of those ways sound fantastic.
I love it.
And Nikki, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nikki.
And we're just so excited. I think Christy almost said her last name too. I've got Christy that also joined us, but I'm not sure if we've given her a shout out or not. So,
because we don't keep any paperwork and we don't keep up.
we have jobs and we have kids and we have husbands that act like kids.
Listen,
So,
this is what I need to tell you. Here's why we really need you guys to spread the word about this Patreon account. Eli came up to me the other day.
What happened?
And he said he was pointing in his mouth. And he gets like ulcers and stuff. For those who are new listeners, Eli is my baby, and he's nonverbal. I mean, he's very verbal, but he's not conversational.
not in the way
you would like for him to be
Right.
verbal. But he came up to me and he kept pointing in his mouth, and I was like, what is it? Because he gets ulcers sometimes.
Yep.
And so we were looking, and he said teeth and pointed back to the back side of his teeth, and he had a tooth that was cracked in half. Okay. Now,
How did he do that?
well, now for those who know us personally, Eli has a pastime of deconstructing the Roundup gang, in particular, Woody and all his friends from Toy Story. So he has all these little dolls and action figures, and he likes to take them apart. Well, I mean, if he can't get it apart the way he wants to, he'll just go backwoods on it and use them teeth.
I mean, that sounds
and strip it. Okay.
reasonable to me.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming that's how he broke that back tooth. And so I told Philip, I said, look, we're going to take him to the dentist and see what we need to do. So we take him to the dentist, and I'm thinking, like, I already feel like a terrible mother because this baby has got a tooth that is cracked right down the center. And I'm also thinking, how is this not, like, killing him, hurting?
Yeah.
But he really hadn't complained about it much. Well, we get back there, and they said, do you think he would sit for x-rays? And I said, well, we can see. And so Philip takes him back there. Well, before she can even, like, get around to the other side, she was like, oh, okay, well, we can stop. He had 3 cracked teeth.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, 3 in the back that are cracked in half.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm telling you, like, this kid does not feel pain the same way that we do.
I didn't realize it was that bad.
I don't know if other people who have children or relatives or friends on the spectrum, if they have this same thing, but I'm telling you, this kid does not feel pain the way that we do, or the way that I do. And so, like, he's been, because, so when you have a child with autism or special needs, like for us, we can't just go in and get laughing gas or whatever and get a tooth filled or pulled or whatever. Like, we have to go to an OR at Children's, and he has to be sedated, put under to do this. So not only is that expensive, but you have to wait on that to be available, and his dentist has to reserve a room, all this. So it's about a month process of waiting.
Oh my gosh.
And like, he'll come up and he'll say tooth, and I'll give him an ibuprofen, and he's fine for the day.
Oh, my gosh.
Never complains about it again.
So it's still not resolved. You're still waiting.
No, he's still walking around with 3 cracked teeth.
And he's eating okay?
Oh, girl, he runs through.
In the world?
Eats everything. Yeah.
So will they have to pull those teeth out?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Molars.
Thankfully, he has a lot of crowding. So he was probably, and that was the thing she said too, because at first she was like, we can do root canals. And I was like, well, that seems like a nightmare, because a root canal is multiple visits, number one. And it's about, I don't know, $2,000 a tooth. And so, and every time we had to do something, we would have to go sedate him. And so that's dangerous.
And crowns come off.
Yeah, crowns come off. And he's going to, it's not like he's going to go, oh, well, I just should probably not bite Woody's head off anymore. Like, he's going to continue to do that kind of thing.
That boy will not learn his lesson.
No. So, so I was like, well, should we just pull them? And she said, well, here's the good thing is that he's very crowded anyway. And so she said, most likely if later down the road y'all felt like he could withstand doing like an Invisalign or something, we would probably need to pull some teeth anyway to make room. And they're in the back, so they're not going to bother him, and nobody's going to see it. So I was like, let's do it. So.
Wow.
So get that. Keep that Patreon
because of that,
account up.
please join our Patreon.
Please join our Patreon. Not only will you get amazing content, but you get, now we've started releasing our episodes early.
Yep.
So
my goal is to get them there a week early. We're just going to have to build up to that.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll be doing them a week early.
Yeah.
And then releasing them to the general public.
Yeah.
All right. You ready to talk about this? How it would kind of...
Listen, we're going to try our best.
I mean, do I need to go get some Xanax or...
I mean, I took one before I came.
I mean, this is such a horrible story.
It really is.
Oh my gosh, it's so terrible.
But I will say
it's not hilarious like Conjoined Twins.
Of course not. But I will say a lot of people are watching this, and a lot of people...
They're talking about it.
Are talking about it. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested to, even if it's not the best topic in the world and it's not funny, like, I'm always interested to hear people's opinions and viewpoints on it. So,
and I'll give a little disclaimer before we get going, and that is, number one.
Oh, triggers. Triggers.
There's triggers, yes.
Yeah.
But we will be talking about this documentary in full, so there are spoilers. So if you have not seen it and you don't want to be spoiled, this is not the episode for you. Or at least put it on hold, go watch the show, and then come back. It's an hour and a half long, or it's not even episodes.
Yeah,
it's just
it's
one story. Yeah, and so we are definitely going to tell you what happens in the end. And then secondly, if we laugh at any of this, you have to know that you have to laugh sometimes to keep from crying.
Right.
And it's never meant to be insensitive. It's never meant to offend.
Be disrespectful.
Because this is a horrible, horrible story.
Right.
And, but there are a lot of things to say about it. There's a lot of good discussion, I think, that can come from this.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll start back in, it's hard because... Just like with Abducted in Plain Sight, they kept going back and forth in the timeline.
Yeah.
So it was hard to take notes. By the way, it's done by the same woman that did that movie.
Oh, is it really?
Mm-hmm. It's her, yeah.
You know what? When I was watching it, I remember thinking, this reminds me a lot of how they did Abducted in Plain Sight.
Same person.
Yeah.
Same person.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so we start off by knowing... kind of the end. I mean, the very first scene is somebody finds a young woman who is dead on the side of the road, and nobody knows who she is.
Right.
And so right away we know something horrible has happened. Okay. Mm-hmm. They and
it's Oklahoma City. It's in 1990 when this happens.
That's right. So there's this girl that they find on the side of the road. They figure out her name is Tonya Hughes. And Tonya Hughes was a stripper in Tulsa, and she's got a young son, and his name was Michael. And she's actually not dead on the side of the road. They take her to the hospital where she, in the end, does pass away.
Right.
Her coworkers called her family. Her coworkers found out Tonya has passed away. They called her family, and the family was like, "What are you talking about? We don't have Tonya Hughes. Our child died when she was 18 months old." So, long story short, we discover that Tonya Hughes is not who she said she is, and that's where the mystery starts. That's where this whole story begins, and it takes turns that you can't fathom that things like that could happen to a person.
Right. And so the big question for them is, who is Tonya Hughes? And how did this beautiful woman, who ended up being someone who was very controlled by her husband, who even her coworkers at the club had said they just didn't seem like they went together. Like, it was a very odd relationship. They said, that even with her son, like, Clarence was very controlling. Tonya wasn't allowed to take Michael, her son, anywhere by herself. They noticed that she always had bruises. And
Michael never wanted to be with Clarence.
Right.
If Michael ever had to spend any time with Clarence, it was like, no. I mean, he would just, he would cry, and
right.
He just did not want to go spend any time with Clarence. And all those coworkers of hers, they all had nothing but wonderful things to say about her. She was sweet. She was lovely. She did come in with bruises, and she always had an explanation for them. She loved her son. She was an amazing mama. And we find out that that's true of her whole life. Everybody that knew Tonya loved her, and they thought she was amazing, but they all knew that she had this mysterious husband.
Right.
This partner that always went with her everywhere, who was significantly older than she was.
Yeah. And so when they get her to the hospital, they realize that she has a closed head injury, and they put her in the ICU. But her husband tells all of her friends, look, she's not allowed to have any visitors. And the nurses who start kind of looking over her say, look, this doesn't really seem like a hit and run. Like, that's what they're assuming it is, because she's laid out on the side of the road. Like, the guy that discovered her said he thought like it was a pile of trash or something, but she was so like jumbled up. But they noticed that she had like scratches, that she seemed like she'd almost been beaten to death.
Yeah.
Is how it appeared to them. But they could never really prove that.
Well, the doctor was like, she was stable when I left her.
Yeah,
she was fine.
She looked okay, and then all of a sudden she just rapidly declined, and all of a sudden passes away.
Yeah, but that was a mystery too. The doctor was like,
right.
How does this happen?
How does that even happen?
Isn't that one of your biggest fears in the whole world?
Dying?
No, to be in a hospital like that, or even just at home and just be feeling totally fine. And then, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So she was fine. I mean, obviously she was in bad shape, but she was stable, and she was probably going to survive this thing.
It shouldn't have been life-threatening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was going to be tough, but she was going to survive this thing. And she probably would have wanted to, because of that little baby. She would have fought to get better.
Also, she was 20 years old.
20. See, we're talking about her, and you would think we're talking about a 55-year-old weathered woman who's been through so much, but she was 20.
I have a child older than she was when she died. As they go on, she's passed away, and they find out that her name isn't Tonya Hughes, because as soon as she passes away, DHS is called by her friends, because her friends are like, look, she loved this baby. There's no way that we can leave him with this daddy, because we've seen him. He's abusive to her. Most likely he will be abusive to this baby. We can't see that happen. She loved this baby so much. So DHS gets involved, and they put Michael in a foster home.
A great foster home.
A sweet couple named Meryl and Ernest Bean.
It had like 7 other kids.
when they're on that documentary, towards the end, I was like, good grief, how many?
They just take anybody in.
How many can you foster?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Those are angels on earth, those people.
But now they said that when they got him, poor little Michael was not in the best shape either.
Well, gosh, I wonder why.
Well, and this is one of these parts that are not funny, but we're from Alabama, okay? And so when they said that DHS worker pulled up and said, look, now he's 2 years old. They said, this one's still on a bottle, and he will only drink Pepsi. Yes. I thought to myself, well, that sounds like one of my neighbors growing up.
Hey, listen, when I was a kid, my mom still tells me this, pediatrician instructions that tell her that she can give me Coke in a bottle.
Shut up.
diluted with a little water.
Are you serious?
I'm not even kidding. Like, he said, you can give her a little bit of Coke in a bottle. I guess they felt like maybe sugar was okay, or I don't know.
Well, now for Michael, they said that this little baby was a little bit of a terror. Like when they first got him, they said like he was a lot to handle.
Well, he did not have a very stable home.
Well, he was running on caffeine.
Yeah.
And so, like, imagine if all you, I mean, it's like me as a 2-year-old. I drink Mountain Dew all day.
Yeah.
And so if I was a little toddler, I'd probably be a fright. I mean,
Nova asked me if she could have some iced coffee this morning. Because my older child drinks it and my teenager
could I
drinks
just have a little cappuccino?
But listen, I am Cuban and I grew up drinking café con leche, which is basically
Coffee
café au lait, coffee and milk. And café con leche is made with espresso. And every day of my life
strong
until
stuff.
I got through high school, I drank a café con leche. So maybe the reason we Cubans are super gregarious and outgoing is because we start the day off with some espresso.
Well, maybe the reason I'm addicted to Mountain Dew is because my grandmother used to take her coffee in a spoon and feed it to me when I would walk up to her. I'm not kidding. When she would watch me, my mother said that she would get on to her because she said, I kept seeing you walk up to her and I was like, what does she keep going up there? Well, it was because my grandmother would put milk and sugar in her coffee and feed it to me out of a spoon. And she was like, you were barely walking. So that's probably why I have a caffeine addiction. But the beans were a little wiser. Meryl said, well, I think what I'm going to do is just give him some milk. In a cup. And so
Just like
she said,
like Coke.
she said she did. And she said by the end of the night, he was just as settled and seemed to start growing and improving without all that Pepsi.
It didn't take long for him to settle into this family.
It didn't take long at all. But Clarence is not real happy. Was not
The
happy.
whole time they had him, he was trying to get him back. And you can see him, they have video of him in court trying to get him back and how a child needs his parent. And he was trying to get, he would have visitation, but Michael hated going. He hated going to, did I just say he hated going?
He hated going.
Clarence, right? Like little Michael absolutely hated going to go see Clarence. So,
He called him the mean man.
yes, the mean man. At that time, they did a DNA test, which that was 1990, so that was revolutionary, really. I mean, it's not like now you can get your DNA at Walgreens.
Right.
So it turns out Clarence is not actually biologically related to the kid, so they terminated his parental rights. Well, that same week, the foster mom sees this truck riding really slowly across her parking, the front of her house. So she calls the social worker, and the social worker says, you are just dreaming things up. I know that Clarence drives a truck exactly like the one that's in front of your house.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not him.
Or even if it is, don't worry about it.
I mean, what's he going to do?
It'll be fine.
It'll be totally fine.
Yeah.
Fast forward, Clarence walks into Michael's elementary school at gunpoint, takes the principal.
Now, this is in 1994.
Yes.
So it's not like the Beans had just had him for a little while. This kind of custody battle had been going on for 2 years. No, you're right, 4 years.
4 years.
So he was 6 years old by this time. Yeah.
And he was in school. Clarence goes into the school. He takes the principal hostage, and he says, you got to give me this kid. And one thing leads to another, and he ends up kidnapping Michael.
And the principal.
Yes. He took the principal, and he left the principal tied up by a tree. Somebody eventually, this was before cell phones, right? Or at least before they were widespread.
Yeah.
So that principal just kind of hung out until somebody came to find him. He was tied up to a tree. And by that time, Michael and Clarence were long gone.
They were gone. So they contact the FBI, and so you get a chance to meet some of these agents that work on the case for Mike.
And then here's where we meet Joe Fitzpatrick, who is the superstar of this whole documentary. He was my very favorite. I want him to be in charge of my murder investigation.
Yes.
I don't want him to be in charge in case I murder somebody else.
Right, because he's sharp.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing man who led with his head and his heart.
Yeah.
Oh my word.
And he kind of teaches you a little bit about things like this. He tells you that, when you have an abduction, you want to make sure that you recover a kidnapped victim within 48 hours. That's your best chance of survival, because after that, they start going down drastically.
I know that because I watch ID.
Also, they have a show called The First 48 Hours.
Oh, wait, that's on A&E. Also know a lot about hoarders and interventions.
Please do an intervention on me.
Hey, listen, just so you know, for our friendship's sake, if there's ever something in my life that requires an intervention,
Yes.
please do not do that.
You don't want one?
Oh, no. I will not respond to an intervention.
Oh.
I will respond in the exact opposite way that you want me to respond. You have to figure out, go talk to a psychologist, go talk to anybody you can about how to handle whatever situation you need to intervene with me about. I will not respond to an intervention.
Here's what's going to happen if you try to pull an intervention on me. I will, in return, turn everyone against you, and then we will do an intervention on you for trying to do an intervention on me.
I love it.
Because I'm not down.
That's fantastic.
I'm not down either.
If, say, I had a drug problem and somebody did an intervention on me,
Right.
I would light up my crack pipe in the room.
I would go and plant my drugs in their car and say, someone seems to be projecting.
Fantastic.
Yes.
We're on the same page. Okay, good. That's why we're friends.
It would never work. But old Joe Fitzpatrick, he starts doing some investigating, okay? And he finds out that in 1990, our old friend Clarence had tried to collect a life insurance for Tonya, but he used a social security number that came back as Clarence Floyd, okay? And so when he looks up Clarence Floyd, he realizes Clarence has a prison record for abduction and bank robbery. He had attacked 2 females. He was arrested again and had been on the run for 2 decades. So this guy, first off, was not who he said he was. He had a different name as well, because we found out Tonya had a different name, or Tonya wasn't who she was supposed to be. And then we find out that he had a different name as well.
And once they discovered all of this, they said, we think that might have been a hit and run.
Yeah.
We think she did not die of natural causes.
Yeah. But they realize, look, this is a guy who knows how to conceal his identity. They know that he's not really going to be easy to track down and find.
Well, I mean, he is a master class in how to get away with murder.
Let me tell you who would not be good at concealing their identity. And that's me. Y'all would... To conceal your identity, you have to be somebody that can basically talk yourself into believing that your lies are true, okay? And I'm a terrible liar also, because they'd be like, I'd be like, oh, hey, my name's Suzanne. And they'd be like, oh, nice to meet you, Suzanne. And I'd be like, yeah, Suzanne, nice to meet you. Who's Suzanne? Who's Suzanne? And they'd be like, you're Suzanne. And I'd be like, right. I'm Misty. Oh, no. Hey, Suzanne. That's me, Suzanne.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Suzanne. And
what if you wore a wig or something? Can you be changed into somebody else?
Like my identity?
Yeah.
As far as like my...
You don't think you could pretend to be somebody else if you felt like you were being chased?
I could pretend, but I would forget.
Okay.
And I would end up telling on myself. Okay. Not meaning to.
Yeah.
But I'd start... You know how I am. Like, I love... to be the center of attention.
I was going to say, you want people to know you.
I want people to know me. So if I'm concealing my identity, I'm going to try to do that, but then I'm going to get in a party atmosphere, and I'm going to want to, like...
Give it away.
I'm going to tell a story. And I'll be like... And
There's a time, and I killed this man. It was hilarious.
It was hilarious, and my husband's name is Philip, and...
my address is...
My address is so-and-so, and my birthday. Do y'all want to come to my birthday party? My birthday is so-and-so. And, yeah... I would be terrible at it, but old Clarence was
he was
real good at it.
Yeah, well, we find out here soon how good at it he was. All right, so in 1994, there's like a news thing about Tonya. Frack. See, we're laughing because this is like the 3rd time we've tried to tell the story, and I can't get it out.
Take 4.
Okay, all right. In 1994, this lady was watching the news, and she says,
that's Carla.
Okay, take 5. And and goes, well, there's Sharon on television. And it also said, call the FBI if you recognize this girl. Mm-hmm. It turns out that Tonya was actually named Sharon Marshall.
Right.
And this lady and Sharon had gone to high school together. Mm-hmm. So she called the FBI and she said, well, I can tell you who this is.
This is Sharon.
And let me tell you some stories.
Yeah.
And this is where we really start seeing the big picture of who Sharon was and who her dad was and who her /husband was.
Right.
We start to see a clearer picture of how she ended up where she ended up.
Mm-hmm. So they cut to Choctaw, Oklahoma, 1984. Sharon's in high school. When they showed the picture of her at 20, she was gorgeous. But then they showed the pictures of her in high school, and I mean, oh beautiful. My goodness, so beautiful. And not only that, she was really smart. She was very involved. She had really good grades. She was in the science club, ROTC, the gifted program. And she had a lot of friends, although her friends would classify themselves as kind of the outcasts.
Because they were in the gifted program.
They were in the gifted program, which, was that bad in the 80s? I was in elementary school, so I was just praying to get in the gifted program.
Well, I went to a tiny little Christian school where I had 20 people in my in my class.
Yeah.
I finished number 11, so I was not in the gifted.
Well, I had to take ninth grade English 3 times, so I wasn't in the gifted program either.
Not in the top half of my 20-person class.
Right. But apparently they were the nerds.
I guess.
And so, but they said that one of her friends said, look, she was always pulling for the underdog. And as
she was kind to everybody.
She was kind to everybody. And as you kind of get to know her more and what is actually going on at home, you kind of understand why.
She was smart enough that she got a full scholarship to Georgia Tech for aerospace engineering.
I don't even know what that is.
A rocket scientist. Can you imagine the difference in her world if she had ended up at that college? Mm-mm. He wouldn't let her go.
Well, she ended up getting pregnant.
Well, her friends had noticed that her dad was a little bit kooky. And Sharon had told them he's very, very strict. You can't even call me. Mm-hmm. He would get upset if they called her because that meant that she had given them her phone number.
Right.
And, it was just it was weird. Like her friends knew something was up, and her friends' parents didn't like her dad.
Well, the first time she got dropped off at one of her friends' houses, she said that he dropped her off and then said, hey, can I talk to your dad for a minute? And she was like, yeah, and pulled his dad aside and said, hey, look, can you give me a loan?
I mean, as one does.
The
man needs some money. He can't get a job.
What would you do?
He can't get a job.
What would you do if somebody came and dropped their kid off to come spend the night with your child and said, hey, Amaryllis.
Yeah.
Can you give me some money until
the answer's no.
payday?
The answer's no. That used to happen. That used to happen to my dad a lot because
he's a doctor.
Because he's a doctor, and they just perceived that he had millions of dollars hanging out. And so on a regular basis, we had people constantly asking us for money.
Well, I mean, that's exactly why we don't keep our landscaping up. Okay. We don't want anybody pulling up at our house, dropping their kid off for spend the night, thinking that we've got an extra $100 to loan them, because we don't. So I try to keep it real.
It makes things awkward. So if you just want to prevent it.
Yeah. So we don't plant flowers or rake our leaves.
I think that's a great idea.
It's really the best way.
I think that's a great idea.
But you go on to learn a little bit more about her and about her father, who is, again, very odd. Sharon tells people in grades that her mother was actually hit by a car and killed when she was in 2nd grade. He was, like you said, he was really strict. He didn't like her to be on the phone. Sharon discovers something, though, her senior year. She's excited about this opportunity. She's gotten a full paid scholarship to Georgia Tech. And he even takes out an ad in her yearbook and is like, congratulations to my rocket scientist. Like, he was really excited for this experience for her. Although he used a really odd picture. Very sexy picture of her. Mm-hmm. Sharon ends up calling her friends and says, look, I'm pregnant. She says that she's going to have it and put it up for adoption because daddy won't let her keep it. and daddy won't let her go to college anymore.
And they're going to Arizona to have the baby.
Right. And so she says that she can't leave daddy because somebody has to take care of him. And so they end up going to Arizona.
So this friend that spotted her on the television starts telling all these stories about Sharon and their life as high school students. And she said her dad was a weirdo and my parents didn't want any part of it. And my dad especially had told me, do not go anywhere near this man.
Right.
She said my dad went out of town and my mom said, okay, I'm going to let you go to spend the night at their house this one time and don't tell your dad.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere with him. You're just spending the night with your friend.
Right.
And without getting into the details, because it can definitely be something that might trigger some people and just is a very uncomfortable part of this movie.
Yeah.
Something really terrible happens. And that's, I think, what triggered Jenny to really take up the cause when she saw Sharon on the television.
Right.
Because she was able to partner with Joe Fitzpatrick and kind of help move this investigation along.
Well, and that's also at the same time that she tells them, look, this man that you guys are saying is her husband, that's her daddy.
That ain't her husband.
That Clarence, who is saying his name is Clarence Hughes, is actually who we know as Orrin Marshall. I can show you pictures like this is the same guy and that's not her husband, that's her dad.
Warren had a circuit. It was Arizona, Alabama, Kentucky, and Georgia.
Yeah.
And he pretty much, that's where his racket extended.
And basically he took her to New Orleans and married her.
Well, because they were on the run and he knew they would be looking for a father-daughter team and not a husband and wife team.
Right.
So he said, well, I've got a great idea. I'll just marry my daughter.
Right.
And that's what he did.
Right. They're looking around and they're going, okay, so here's what we know so far. We know that this guy has a criminal history. He's got a criminal background. He's abducted young women in the past. We know that this is not her actual husband, but her biological dad.
Her father.
Her father. And we also know that Michael is not his biological son. So Sharon got pregnant by someone who's not him, but this is his daughter.
Right.
But
I mean, nobody else knew that. I mean, you're saying we know that during the investigation. We didn't know that when people knew them. Everybody assumed that
right.
Michael
Everybody
was
assumed, but
Clarence's.
this is what they're learning in the investigation.
Yeah.
But as our friend Joe starts investigating, he says, look, I'm looking back in records, and when Sharon was born, Warren was in prison.
He can't be her daddy.
There's no way that he can be her actual biological father, even though we have pictures of them together as early as her being 4 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
So they realize that Warren
Something's
Marshall
up.
is not her husband or her father, but her kidnapper.
How did they get together is next. That's crazy. Misty, that is crazy. And you know what's so interesting is I'm watching this movie and we're still only like a third of the way through.
Oh, yeah. I remember looking at the timestamp and going,
Well, I
my
thought we
God,
were done.
what else can happen from here?
I mean, this is a big reveal. I mean,
Right.
he's her kidnapper. Well, what could happen next?
Right.
Well, oh my gosh. The stuff that happened next.
A lot can happen next.
Oh my gosh. All right. So now they've moved. Now they've they went to Tampa, Florida.
In 1989.
1989, yeah. They went to a strip club, started working there because that's just the go-to.
And that's where she was working when she died.
Right.
Yeah.
And her dad had pushed her into that strip club, or quote, her dad.
Right.
And she said, my dad brought me here and he even gave me condoms to use.
Yeah. And so
the crowd, I mean, her friends were like, well, okay, that's weird. But
well, because even the ladies that worked there, they were like, look, this was kind of, I mean, I guess what you could call a more upscale strip club. Like, these were very beautiful young women who, you know, were considered themselves entertainers. They didn't consider themselves like prostitutes. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Sharon is
a prostitute.
taking them to the back room and saying $50 and, you know, we can do something different.
Yeah.
And the girls are going, what are you doing? Like, that's
Well,
not
and the
what...
strip club owner was like, we can't do that.
Yeah, that's not what we do here.
Yeah.
Like, what we do on stage is how you make money. That's not what we do here.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, that's what my dad said I should do.
I mean, and he gave me these condoms.
Yeah. So...
It doesn't, I say this a lot when we watch these movies, but it doesn't fit into my head how these things happen.
Right.
How someone could be that evil.
Right.
It doesn't, especially with like a child, I can, I don't want to say it this way, but I can almost understand it if it's an adult because you're adults. You're not taking advantage of a child. Even though you're taking advantage of somebody, it's not a child, an innocent child who doesn't know what's happening to them and can't defend himself or herself. And it doesn't fit into my brain how somebody could change the trajectory of somebody's life intentionally like this.
Yeah.
It's so evil. All right. So while they were it's called Mons Venus, which I don't understand.
Do you not get the play off of that? Mons Pubis?
No, I don't know what that is.
That's a woman's area.
I was wondering what you were going to say. Sometimes silence is the best thing. I don't get it. I'm too innocent. I don't know.
Let me double check, but I'm pretty sure.
You have to double check the double entendres.
It's the pubic mound.
Oh, gross.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to...
Listen, the only reason I know that this is because I used to be a medical transcriptionist. And I had to take an anatomy course. And so the Mons Pubis, that's what it's called.
Oh.
And so they call it the Mons Venus because men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Well,
it?
Thank you for explaining that to me.
I'm so red in the
face. The whole time I'm like, well, I was a French minor and it kind of sounds French-y. Like Mon Venus?
No, ma'am. No.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
See what together we can figure
We can accomplish anything between the two of us.
We're so smart.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so they were at this strip club. That's where they were. And there was a girl that worked there also named Cheryl.
Yeah.
Cheryl somehow got mixed up with Clarence. She was friends with Sharon.
She befriended Sharon.
Or Tonya, whatever her name was. And somehow, because Clarence is a predator, talked her into taking pictures, talked her into the next thing.
Well, he said, I'm going to give these to Playboy, and you're really going to be something big.
This is going to change your life.
Because she was doing really well at the club. And so, she knew how to, obviously manage her money. They said that she drove a really nice sports car.
She's doing all right.
She was doing all right for herself. And so I'm sure if you're getting that kind of money and you're getting those kinds of, perks. Compliments and perks, you think, well, sure, I could be in Playboy because look how well I'm doing here.
Well, and he's a predator and he knew exactly what buttons to push.
Oh, yeah. He knew exactly what
and
to
she
say.
would come in and she might be beat up or she might be not doing so good one day to the next, then she would disappear and then she would come back. But the bottom line is, after a number of things had occurred, he had killed her. She was found, there were some bones that were found, and it turned out, there's a lot of things that happened in there that I don't think we could ever even cover. But the bottom line is, he had killed her.
Yeah.
It was around that time, right before she was discovered, as before her body was discovered, and it took a while to find her, that they disappeared from Tampa.
Right.
And nobody knew why. And she was already pregnant with Michael.
Yes.
Or she might have even already had Michael.
Yeah.
But they disappeared. And the reason was because he had killed somebody.
He had killed her
so
friend.
It was time to move on again.
Yeah, he had to move out.
Suddenly the marshals totally disappeared. And this violence and abuse, it was, the FBI discovered it was a pattern. That's what they would do, or he would do. He would abuse. He might kill somebody. He may do something, and then he'd move on.
Right.
So this agent that I love so much, he had figured out their pattern.
Right.
And he said, well, if I know the pattern, he's only got a handful of states that he's going to go to. So I'm going to call all those states and I'm going to alert them all. And sure enough, he went to Kentucky and he was there to renew his license. And guess how they were able to catch him, Misty? Well, you watched it, so you know.
Well, I do know. He decided to get his driver's license renewed.
Right.
Yeah.
But in order to serve his serve him the arrest warrant, how did they do it? A UPS driver.
Right. Yeah.
An agent dressed like a UPS driver went and, because he, I'm sure maybe he wasn't expecting it. He'd been on the run for 20 years, for heaven's sake.
Well, I mean, he'd gotten away with it for that long. Why would he expect anybody would catch him?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So an agent dressed like a UPS driver went to arrest him.
Yeah.
But no one could find Michael.
Well, they take him in to question him, and they're like, look, we know you took Michael. Where is he at? And he goes, look, I've dropped him off with a very rich family.
Oh, yeah, he's fine.
He's fine. I was like, this reminds me of the parents who say, we have taken your dog to a farm. Like, his reasoning, surely he didn't think anybody was going to buy that.
Well, it seems to kind of be
like, you took them from a very good family. Why would you take him to another good family?
Well, that's the go-to. You hear that pretty regularly on these high-profile cases. I don't know if you remember a few years ago. It's been like 10 years. Casey Anthony. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that case?
Zanny the nanny is who she took hers to.
Yeah, she's at the nanny. She's fine.
And her name's Zanny.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
They're totally, and it seems to be kind of a pattern.
Her Zanny the nanny reminded me of every time Phoebe on Friends would have to come up with a name, and she'd be like, Regina Phalange. Leonard Banana Strap. Yeah,
Zanny the nanny. Yes, it's just a pretty normal way to kind of get out of it. You guys don't worry about it. He's totally fine.
Right. You guys are just...
Listen, FBI, don't worry.
You guys are making a big deal out of nothing.
Please go catch the bad guys.
That's fine. Yeah.
So that's exactly what happened here. And the FBI or the feds said, we're pretty sure he did something to this kid, and we're pretty sure it's not good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we're pretty sure that he has killed him. But we don't have a body. Mm-hmm. We don't have any proof. It's all circumstantial. And if we charge him with murder, he's going to get off.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want.
Well, and the profiler even said, look, this guy is not going to put up with taking care of a child for any length of time. That kid's probably got a week. And then he's going to get tired of him, and he's going to kill him.
So they charged him with kidnapping. They charged him with a litany of charges, and it ended up putting him away for a very long time. And Jenny, the friend that saw Sharon on television, was instrumental in that. My favorite part of that, Misty, and I bet you'd agree, is he defended himself. He didn't have. I think he had a lawyer, but he also defended himself, and he did the cross-examination of Jenny. And he said,
all idiots do this.
When did you start hating me? In other words, he tried to imply that she was only testifying against him because she didn't like him.
Right.
And she said, well, I started disliking you when you dressed your child in lingerie.
Right. It was a little concerning.
And the best part of that was she said the lawyer behind him just threw his papers up in the air.
And was like,
okay, I'm done.
Well, this is, yeah.
So he was put away for, I think it was like 52 years. And by then he was in his 60s.
Well, and one of the ways that they were able to do that was because they realized that he had kidnapped her. And so they got together with this other investigator that said, look, I can use DNA, and I can use DNA of relatives in order to figure out who this child really is, because we still don't know who she is. We don't know if her real name's Sharon. We don't know if her real name's Tonya. We don't have any idea. So what we can do is we can use DNA to try to find some of her relatives. And through this system, they were able to track down her mom and dad, which was insane.
So the way they were able to do that, the way they were able to get her DNA was because they got an anonymous phone call.
Right.
And they said, would it be helpful if you had actual DNA from Sharon?
Right.
And they said, yes, that'd be
amazing.
Helpful. Well, they were at a dead end. They had absolutely no idea. Had no idea who she was. And so they got her DNA.
So the way they got the DNA was basically this case had become high profile enough that her picture was being seen in news outlets all over the place. And it just so happened that a woman saw the newscast, saw Sharon's picture, or Tonya. Sharon and Tonya are the same person if you're confused through this, and says, oh my gosh, that's your birth mother. And looks at her daughter and says, that's your birth mother. And she's like, oh my gosh. So this woman had adopted a little girl, and when she adopted her, she actually was in the I guess you would call it birthing room.
Yeah.
She was in the birthing room with the mother when she gave birth, and the nurse hands the adoptive mother the baby and says, hey, here you go. And the adoptive mother said, would you like to see the baby? And she said, no, I can't. I just want you to take care of her. And she said as soon as she said that, she got that few little minutes with her, and the birth mother's husband walked in, which we now know was Clarence or Warren, whichever name you want to use. Or Floyd.
Franklin.
And walked in, and immediately she shut down. The birth mother shut down and didn't say another word. And so this adoptive mother calls into the FBI and says, look, I know you're trying to figure out who this woman is. If I was able to give you some DNA from one of her children, would that be helpful? I know this is the birth mother of my adopted daughter. And so they're like, absolutely, yes, 100%. So she brings her daughter in, who by that time was, an adult. And she gave DNA, and they swabbed her and were able to bring up a profile to where they were also able to use this new DNA system matching different relatives, that they were able to find her birth mother and father, Sharon's. Mm-hmm. And so then you meet Sharon's birth mother and father, and you hear the story of how Sharon ends up being abducted by Clarence.
I blame her mama.
Her mother is, I just looked at her and I thought,
this is your fault.
How are you not even shedding a tear through this? Yeah. My whole life would be destroyed.
Oh, yeah.
Not only at the time that it happened, but then when I figured out what my baby's life looked like and ended like after that, this woman shows no emotion. So basically, Sharon's birth mother and father were high school sweethearts. They get together. Dad ends up having to go to, was it Vietnam?
Vietnam, yeah. They got married, and he was drafted to go to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. He didn't get to meet, the little girl's name was actually Susie.
Yeah. Susie.
So it turns out that Sharon's name is actually, it's not Tonya, it's not Sharon, it's Susie. Mm-hmm. Little Susie was 6 months old before Dad could meet her because he was away in Vietnam.
Right.
And then he had to go back. He whatever he was on leave, or whether he re-enlisted, they didn't say, but he had to go back. Susie's dad did not get to meet her until she was 6 months old. And so then he went back to war. And then by the time he got back, Mom was like, I got a boyfriend and I want a divorce.
Hey, it was lonely over
I'm
here.
done.
Yeah.
I'm done. Well, she lived in a trailer, and she got injured by a tornado, which we know all about here in Alabama. You do not live in a trailer during tornado season.
If you are in a trailer during tornado season, you need to hit it to the biggest gymnasium
yes.
that your high school can afford you.
Yes.
Because,
get to a basement.
Or get yourself to a storm shelter.
So the state took her children away because she was unable to take care of them because of her injuries. The state called the dad, who was only 23 years old by that time, and said, we've got Susie and we've got 2 other girls, and we want to keep them together. So unless you take all 3 of them, we're going to take all 3 of them and put them somewhere that has a home.
And the other 2 daughters she had with a boyfriend. So these other 2 didn't even belong to Susie's dad.
Exactly.
So he was young. He was like, look, I'm not in a place to raise a child, much less 3. So I'm just going to sign away my parental rights, and you give her to someone that will take good care of her.
Okay, first, can we just pause for a minute? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're only 23 years old. During that time, 50-something years ago, that's just how it was. You got married young, and you had your children young. So it was not a shock to be 23 years old and to have children.
I was 23 with 2 children.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This was not a shock. Okay. Yeah. You had a baby, and I totally get it. It was just a bad time for you. I get it.
Right.
But you have a child, and you got to make it work. Now, the state said, we're keeping these 3 girls together. I'm thinking, no, you don't. They're not my children. I get to keep Susie. She's mine.
Right.
So he didn't even push back. Like, I don't know the story, but I imagine that he would look back on it now as a 70-something-year-old man.
Regretfully, surely.
And say, I should have fought differently.
Right.
Because he absolutely had the right to keep his own child. That's not something that would happen today. I mean, certainly they would want to try to keep them together, and that's ideal. But dad gets to stay with his own child.
Yeah. Honestly, I think he probably just looked at that and, number one, you're not super smart when you're 23.
Right.
I mean, he probably did not.
So he was living at home. Why didn't his mom and dad say,
right.
bring that baby over here? That's our grandchild.
He probably didn't know his rights. And to be quite honest, if he's 23 and single, he probably was not wanting to take on the role of being a father. I mean, he never even really got to know her. He met her once when she was 6 months old, went back to war.
Yeah.
And so it's not like he had a bond with her.
Yeah.
So it probably was just like, well, yeah, this is probably just the best thing. And being young and dumb and definitely not wanting responsibility for two others that don't even belong to you, thought, well, this is just the way it's going to pan out.
I guess I'm looking at it from a lens of 2022
Right.
and how the state doesn't get to take my child when I'm perfectly capable of taking care of her.
Oh, it would never happen to me.
You know what I
there's
mean?
no way that I would let that happen.
Yeah. And him doing that changed her life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, and not for the better. I mean, it absolutely changed her life.
It actually ended her life.
It ended her life.
Yeah.
It ended her life.
It ended her life.
And it ruined many lives in between.
Right.
I mean, it was just such a selfish thing to do.
Yeah.
So mom starts getting back into church. She's like, I'm sick. I need help. I need to get my life right.
Yeah.
So she goes to church and she meets this man, and his name is Warren. And Warren says, God sent me to help you.
Can we give
Where do we know another Warren that says that?
Warren
Maybe.
Jeffs? Hey, let us give you a little advice. Anytime anyone, even say you're new to church or you're new to Christianity, whatever religion you've decided, and you start going to a church, anytime someone comes up to you and says, hey, God told me to tell you, I need you to just take a beat.
The scripture says, test everything. That does not pass the test.
Let me tell you what my response, and we talked about this in Sunday school. Anytime somebody says, hey, God told me to tell you, most likely my response is going to be, he has not told me.
Right.
Okay?
My husband tells a story that before we were together, he had an ex-girlfriend who...
We hope you're not listening to this podcast.
She don't know me. He had an ex-girlfriend who called him up and she said, hey, I have to tell you something. God has told me that we are supposed to get married. And he said, well, I talk to the Lord pretty regularly, and he has not told me. So let's wait on that to happen, and then we'll worry about it.
She said, God said I'm getting a ring by spring. So I'm going to need you to hop on that.
It's been, for me, it's been at least 17-ish years, and he
he's
has not
still
told him that yet.
Told him that prophecy yet. Well, yeah. And this is not an odd thing for people who are manipulative to use. My daddy was a pastor of a church, and one time had a young man come to service one Sunday morning and came up to my dad before service started and said, hey, my name's so-and-so, and I'm a pastor, and God sent me to your church, and he said that I'm supposed to give the message this morning instead of you. Now, my daddy had never seen this man before in his life, and he said, well, let me tell you something. God did not tell me that. So I'm going to need you to take a seat in the back or get in your truck and go home. So
He never told him that, I assume.
Yeah, he didn't. He never did tell him that. So
Warren says, yeah, I'm the man that God is sending to help you. And she's so vulnerable and dumb. Mm-hmm. There, I said it.
Yeah.
She was dumb and desperate. I mean, desperation makes you do terrible things and make unwise decisions. She wrote a bad check. She found herself in a spot where she wrote a bad check, and she was sent to jail for 30 days.
Yeah.
And Warren said, well, I'll take care of these girls. Don't you worry.
Well, now they were in foster care. And he actually, when she started the church, the kids were in foster care. And that was one of the ways he kind of got her. He said, look, I know you don't have any money. I know you don't have any ties. Like, I'll help you get your girls back. And so she was like, okay, well, that'll work. And so together they got the girls back. And so that's how she got them back, was by being with him, because back then
they got married. They were also
got married. They weren't going to give these children back to a single mother who didn't have a job, but they would give them back. Right, or husband. I mean, Lord, you had to have a husband.
Yeah.
And so, but she knew they would give him back to her if she was married and he had a job and could provide a stable home.
So she goes to jail for 30 days for writing this bad check.
Right.
And that's when he took the girls.
Right.
And when she came out of jail, she was like, "Where's my girls?" And she went to the police, and the police said, "Well, you're married, so we're not doing anything.
There's
'Cause
nothing you can do about that.
You guys are married." So
Yeah.
he dropped the 2 other girls off at an orphanage, and he took Susie with him. And they were never seen again. At least not by the family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like she didn't even try to find them.
No.
It's like she went to the police. It's kind of like when we watched Abducted in Plain Sight, and old Jan was gone for the whole day, and then 2 days, and then 3 days, and she was like, "I just knew they were going to come back soon."
I just felt like they were going to come back.
and I didn't want to call. I was going to get them in trouble.
See, this is why I'm like, obviously they did not have enough 2020 back then.
No, they had 0 20.
They had no clue that things like this could happen.
Yeah.
And so when it did, they just assumed the best. And so in her mind, she's probably thinking, "Oh, well, he's just punishing me for getting in trouble and they'll be back. Like, he's just trying to teach me a lesson or whatever." And she never came back. And apparently, I mean, the woman did nothing in order to find them. I mean,
She didn't do anything. That's the thing. Their friends were like, or the lady from, was it the lady from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children? I think it was her, And she said she didn't really do anything to find them. It doesn't make sense to her. Why?
No.
Why didn't we do something to try to find this little girl?
I mean, they basically said, "Hey, you're married. That's basically her father, so he's got rights." And she was like, "Okay."
So now Joe, the FBI agent, says, "This is great. There's only been one case in my career where I have not been able to solve something, and this was, or 2 times, and that was where Michael was and who this little girl was."
Right.
And they were able to solve it after he had retired even. He had come back to kind of help this whole investigation. And so he said, "I could never find where Michael was. I don't know where he is, and I don't know what happened to him, but at least I know who this young girl is."
Right.
So that's when the feds jumped back in, and they said, "We're going to give it one more go."
Yeah.
And they went back and they talked to Warren, Clarence, Franklin, whatever his name is, in
Right.
jail. And for some reason on that day, he was super talkative.
Yeah.
And he said, he told them the story of how he had taken the girl. And then they said, "Where's the boy, Michael?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I shot him in the head twice so he would not suffer." And he said, "And I buried him at the Oklahoma border."
Yeah.
And they searched and they couldn't find him.
Right.
Of course, that was a 2-year-old little boy. However many years ago, it's probably not doable to find him, but at least they know what happened to him. And they know who Susie was. And now her daughter has a legacy to live up to. And she had a child, and she named her child Michael after her little brother, which I actually might start crying right this second about it, because it's just so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad. First of all, this girl who, she doesn't know who her dad is.
Yeah.
I mean, because her mom was forced to sleep with whoever.
Right.
She was not conceived in love.
Yeah. But now one shining light came out of that confession, and he told them that he had buried him near the border. And even though they couldn't find Michael's body, they did find the principal's truck, which they never could recover.
Yeah.
And so they find this truck, and they're searching around it, trying to find clues of maybe he's lied to us, maybe Michael's somewhere else. And they find an envelope taped to the bottom of
The truck.
Warren's truck. And when they pull out this envelope, they find all these child pornography images and images of young women in different, stages of dress. But then,
And the little ones were of
Sharon.
Tanya and Sharon. I mean, he photographed her from the time she lived in a state of abuse for her whole life.
yeah, she was sexually abused her whole life and probably trafficked, if I had to
I'm
guess.
sure. Oh, yes.
But they then discover some photos of this woman who is in different stages of being beaten. And so they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, here she is with these injuries." And then as they keep looking, they finally find a picture where she appears to be deceased. And so they're like, oh my gosh, there's somebody else out there that he's murdered. We've got to figure out who this is. Cut to, they shared these photographs with the
Cold
people.
cases in those states where he always
Right,
visited.
where he always visited. And one of those states happened to be the strip club where Tonya had worked. In Tampa. And some of her coworkers were able to identify this as her friend Cheryl.
Yeah.
So the friend,
which was the reason that they had to leave Tampa, because he had killed Cheryl.
So they realized then, okay, that's why they left Tampa, was because he had murdered Cheryl and then left. And so then they were able to solve this mystery of this woman and where was Cheryl all these years. So then he was able to be convicted of her murder as well.
Yeah. And I'm sure they said it on there, but I'm not sure that I remember. Is he still alive?
He died.
Did he die? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Misty, listen, as soon as this was over, I said to Misty, we cannot do this. This is so hard.
Yeah.
This is so terrible. It was just so when it's over, because it's different than Abducted in Plain Sight, because there's a happy ending, so to speak, for Abducted in Plain Sight, because she has her family and they loved her and they still all had each other and her parents were married still. And, she had a soft place to land.
Right.
But this one, there is no happiness. There's no joy in any of this at all.
No.
It was so hard. I said, how are we going to talk about this?
Yeah, it was hard.
This one was hard.
I will say that.
Can we do like Pee-wee's Playhouse or something next week?
No, he does some pretty bad stuff in a
He does
movie
do some
theater.
pretty bad things.
I hope he's redeemed himself, but he was kind of gross.
Okay.
I will say that I watch documentaries like this, and a lot of people go, how could you watch that? Like, why would you watch that? What would make you want to watch that? But when I watch things like this, of course, it does make me a little bit of how I am. It makes me more protective over my children. But even more than that, it reminds me to, number one, always be aware of my surroundings and question things. Like, if I see something that doesn't appear right, if a child's in my home and I see bruises or I see something that doesn't appear right, or their parent seems off.
It's a lesson for sure.
It's a lesson to not stay quiet about those kind of things. I worked as a paraprofessional and a substitute teacher, and so have you. And one of those things that you have to go through when you're training is that you're supposed to be a reporter of anything like that.
Yeah, you're a mandatory reporter.
You're a mandatory reporter. And so, it's important that, this little girl was in school many, many years. And there's no way you can tell me that a teacher didn't notice a bruise on her, that they didn't notice that maybe she wasn't eating well. Children who are abused show signs.
Well, I will say this. You're not wrong about that. That this was not new. And her friends talked about it.
Right.
Her friends knew.
Yeah.
Her friends knew stuff was going on. And her friend Jenny experienced the abuse when she spent the night at her house.
Yeah.
But this was the early 70s. Or was it the early 80s at least.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
That's not... You don't want to get a parent in trouble. So, it is a different world. Mandatory reporting is a new thing.
Yeah.
It's not something that has always been. So, in their defense, there's that, but also not in their defense. All these grown-ups that were around this young woman are totally responsible for it.
Yeah.
Totally
And
responsible.
it's also another reminder, teach your children it's okay to tell on adults. It's okay that if you see something that you know is not okay or you feel like is not okay, teach your kids, you can tell me.
Yeah.
You won't get in trouble for telling me that you saw something bad.
Yeah. And I have always taught that to my children, and God forbid anything happened like this to them. But I know that for both of our girls, we've always told them, we don't keep secrets from mommy and daddy. If somebody does, and we tell them, if somebody touches you inappropriately, if something makes you feel uncomfortable, and if somebody tells you that they're going to hurt us,
right,
you just pretend like, okay, and then you come straight back and you tell us all about it, because they will never hurt us.
Yeah.
And we try to give them peace of mind that we're okay.
Yeah.
We just want you. We have to prepare them because there are lunatics like this. There are. I'm not like you. Like I don't. That made it sound. I didn't. Sorry, I did not mean that for that to sound like that.
Okay.
But I don't fear it like you do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a difference in personality.
Right.
I'm just saying I don't fear it in terms of my day to day. You know, I know it happens. I know it's horrific, and we prepare and we teach our kids those things. But it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that it's you know, not out there, because I know it is, and that it does happen.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also a difference in life experience. Different people experience different things, and so. You know,
Totally.
I think one of the things that I didn't feel as a child was that I always was scared that I would get in trouble. If anything, if I saw something bad happen, or if something was to happen to me, I was always scared that I would be in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, with my kids, yes, I tell them to make sure that they let me know things, to not be scared, but also don't be scared that you're going to get in trouble. Not just that the person's going to get in trouble or your friend's going to get in trouble. You'll never, and I tell my kids this now, you will never get in trouble for telling me the truth.
Yeah.
Ever. Okay? We may have to talk about it,
Yeah.
and we may have to make some changes, and there may be some consequences, but I will never be mad at you
Yeah.
for telling me the truth. So anyway, I know this was a really, really tough one.
It's a downer, Misty.
It was a really a downer. Thankfully, we are so stupid that we make a lot of mistakes. So hopefully we'll leave some of our flubs in here just to bring some humor.
Oh gosh,
Humorous
some
breaks,
levity.
a little bit of lightness
yeah
to it.
I don't know what we'll do next.
I don't
That's
know.
how we always end. I have no idea what we're going to do next.
We never know. We just always leave
No,
y'all with a
something
cliffhanger.
fun.
Yeah.
I'm picking it this time.
Well, you picked this
I kind of picked this one. I tried to get out of it, but then I didn't have time to watch anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it'll be.
Yeah.
We'll see. I wish there was another Lula Rich.
What I wouldn't give for another Lula Rich right now.
Or a Chicken People.
Yeah. Oh, I loved Chicken People.
I know.
Man.
Y'all give us your suggestions.
Maybe we should do we should do a food documentary, maybe. Another one.
I love a food documentary.
I do too.
Like Food Inc. kind of started the whole
Yeah.
farm to table thing.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
We'll
see.
have to look into it.
All right. I guess I'll see you in about 5 minutes when we start our Patreon episode.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.